So anyway, Benita, I want to ask you if you can sort of, I know this is hard to do because you're doing such a diversity of things, but I want to ask you if you can, just in a nutshell, tell us what are the kinds of things that your work is encompassing today.
Well, today, the main focus of my work has been in teaching. And you said, at Santa Clara University with engineering students. And but the main focus within that is to, I've created a framework for understanding gender differences in terms of different competencies. RA's been using the word roles. And rather than roles, I like to think in terms of different competencies that are complementary that men and women bring to the workplace. And my purpose, clearly I'm wearing several hats. We've already referred to that. I have every intention of being able to make a difference in the corporate workplace. And at the same time, I'm working with women from around the world, the developing world primarily, and hoping to make a difference in their leadership and what they're up to. But my focus has been on illuminating, identifying, naming what I call the relational competencies that often women bring that all have been invisible and unarticulated, undervalued, and actually misinterpreted. And I have a story I can tell you about that makes it pretty clear. And out of this, often these relational competencies are filtered out of organizations and filtered out of whether they're corporate or nonprofit or government. And it's these different the more high context, connecting the dots, what we call systems thinking in Peter Senge's words, that I think is so important to be able to bring to the workplace and to the global community.
Okay, so you mentioned a story. I'll try to use competencies. Okay. So,
it's not a pretty word, unfortunately.
No, it's a beautiful word. It's a beautiful word. But what you're talking about relational competencies, and you said you had a story that illustrates that, and I'm interested if you could share that story with us.
Yeah. Well, it was in the early 90s that, actually 91, that I did my original research at Sun Microsystems, and I don't usually name organizations to keep the confidentiality, but Sun no longer exists as a company. And also Carol Bartz, who I interviewed, which was the pivotal time, the pivotal insight.
Can you tell us who Carol Bartz is?
She was second in command at Sun Microsystems. She was the vice president of worldwide operations. She later went on to be CEO at Autodesk for over a decade, and then did her turn at Yahoo. And now she's on corporate boards rather than leading any companies. But at the time, she was one of the few leading women in Silicon Valley. And it was the vice president of one of the divisions of Sun who had wanted to have a project for his executives on what is the contribution women make that could be the strategic advantage in the global marketplace. And I got to be on the consulting team to do the research. And even though they paid us for 3 days, we were in there for days and days doing interviews and research. And interviewing Carol Bartz, she was not part of that division, but it was a critical part. And it was Carol that I asked, what is it that she brings to the executive team as a woman that wouldn't be there otherwise? And first of all, she said she didn't consider it to be gender. And that's an important piece because most women don't identify themselves as bringing something different. For them, it's common sense what they're bringing. But she said she brought an ability to see all the different ramifications of a given issue, that for the most part, the executives would prioritize, take the highest priority problem and the highest priority solution, put the solution against the problem, and fight any fires that happened afterwards. She said she liked to prevent fires. And that's my first distinction of different competency. we certainly identify firefighters in the workplace, but how many times do we say, oh, he or she is a great fire preventer? Because it's mostly invisible. In any case, she said that she liked to prevent fires. She liked to see all the different ramifications of an issue and would come up with a more complex solution. And I had been reading Peter Senge's book at the time, and I'd identified with being a systems thinker myself. So when I heard this, it was like the big aha. But then she added, for this, she was considered to be not a team player. And, that took me back. Although it made sense. She wasn't following the call, and I'm using American sports analogies. Usman and
Usman.
that she wasn't following the call of the quarterback or the coach. She was getting into other people's turfs. Our sports teams are often segmented into responsibilities. And she was stalling the action because it was a more complex solution. You couldn't just move forward quickly. So, and to some degree, I know that firefighters really love to fight fires. This is a segue, but I've worked with a fire department, and they told me that when there's a fire that's set, they always check to see if a firefighter has set it because they want to be able to fight fires. And indeed, wow. I've actually had women say they've been told, if you want to get ahead in this company, you've got to light a few fires and put them out. So that's the degree to which this firefighting image, it has been important. And I would hope that it's changing, but
so that story is a good illustration. I know that when we were preparing, you showed me this one particular image of relational competency versus individual, and I thought that would be interesting to share with us. Do you have that handy?
Yes, I do. Let me just, here I have it. Let me put it right up there if I can. That means sharing my screen.
Right. Yeah.
So I have to there it is.
I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but I just thought it would be a great time to share that.
Now, just a second. Here we go. This isn't it. Let's see. Let me get to the full screen. And that's my image for the whole world. Bringing the two, the individualistic and the relational together will create a whole new field of possibility.
Now, before you change,
want the other one.
Wait, Bonita.
Yeah.
As I'm looking at this, I have a question, which is, can you explain this a little more, just individualistic versus relational? Because when you work with gender, you don't really talk so much about male qualities or female qualities. You talk about relational and individualistic.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to...
got it.
I will do that, but I had already put this in to bring up.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, let's just say that when I'm talking about men and women, I don't feel comfortable because I know that there's some men that are more relational and some women that are more individualistic. So this is a model. This isn't an absolute. It hasn't been researched, but you can get snapshots that show things like this. But in order to give you more of an idea of what individualistic and relational is, let me do the...
Well, wait, but this is interesting because you're sort of showing this is not exact measurements, but basically the majority of men are individualistic, but lots of them are relational, and the majority of women are relational, but lots of them are individualistic. Mm-hmm. That's really what you're saying here, right?
Yeah, or there's some that are a combination. I also want to say that there's some, like I had in class yesterday, I had a man from the Philippines and a woman actually originally of Chinese background, but from Canada, and actually a man from Uganda, all identifying with being what we call a bridge brain or a combination. And all of them had been very uncomfortable because they knew they weren't like the classic man or woman. But when I could show them this and have them recognize that they have an ability to go with their strengths according to the situation and their choices, they actually felt relieved. You know, several of them, they were talking about how they always consider themselves to be weird. And I said, you're not weird. You're different. And so anyway, that's where I want to make sure that we're getting the full breadth of what's possible here. And for those of you who are familiar with American workplaces, for instance, Myers-Briggs is a personality assessment that measures differences, and there's one dimension that measures it's what we call gender significant. And it's they say that 56% of men are more logic-based decision makers, and 73% of women are more values-based decision makers. So it gives you the idea of an example of where this shows up, and it's not exact, but it does demonstrate the degree to which this is representing something that is useful. And that's why I use individualistic and relational rather than men and women.
Yeah.
I'm gonna backtrack one other slide, because this is recent research that's come out by two anthropologists from Stanford, talking about the independent lens and the interdependent lens, which is the independent lens is the individualistic, and the interdependent lens is another word for what I call relational. And all these different influences on our upbringing, as well as our there's some degree of brain science involved too. But these are all influences that could indicate whether we have a more independent lens or interdependent lens. And I know that, for instance, they made the assessment that Barack Obama is 50-50. So, you know, this is all part of what I have as background, and how it shows up as different competencies.
Wait, so can I ask you a question here?
Sure, you can, Arya.
So if I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, if I'm a male and I'm white and I live in the North and I've been used to business, then I'm more likely to be independent in how I see the world. On the other hand, if I'm not white, if I'm a person of color, if I'm in the South, maybe I'm in Africa, maybe I'm not working maybe I'm working in nonprofit, then I'm more likely to be interdependent in how I view my role in the world. Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Now, I'm also passionate about linguistics. So I think the most accurate way of assessing where someone's from, where the way they're looking at the world, is really in their language and how they think. And just for instance, using the collective we is an indication that you're a more relational person, and thinking from that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a number of different factors that go into this.
Okay.
But
we could spend a long time on this, I realize.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we have time for some conversation. So if there's one or two more things you may want to share with us about this, then I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, the slide I have now is just an indication of how often men and women are assessed. And this is another research project where women are usually assessed based on communal attributes rather than the more agenic attributes. I had wanted to bring up another slide. I just want to,
Sure.
Let's see. I thought I had this all taken care of, so I'd be readily available, but I'm looking for the one I want to bring up. Here, next one. Oops, I escaped out. Here we go. This gives you more of the idea of the different competencies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll also say, and I'm just going to try and get rid of the intellectual stuff in a couple more minutes so that we can talk. But although these are the different competencies, in terms of looking at different cultures, we usually look at how people relate to people, how people use time, and how people use information. And you'll see those differences in the individualistic and relational, and they show up in these competencies. So that, you know, the relational people are interested in building connection and look at the world in terms of the ideas and how they're connected. Whereas there's more individuality and independence in the individualistic person. In terms of time, the relational person is more likely to be doing many things at once, as I am right now. And the individualistic person is more likely to want to focus. And, you know, I want to get focused, and that other person who's scattered all over the place looks like she's incompetent, you know. And then, so it's time, relationship, and also information. The relational person will share information for the sake of sharing information. New information can be created out of sharing information, whereas a more individualistic person is more likely to just hold information until it's needed. In any case, these competencies come out from there. I think one of the most important ones is the role of empathy, getting into the other person's shoes and looking from there, rather than saying, I'm the expert, I know what's best for the customer. So I think that covers the ground in terms of these differences, and I'm open for questions.
Okay.
You know where I'm coming from. And
so, Benita, one thing that occurs to me is if you would be willing to share these slides with us so we can put them on our website as follow-up to the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
great.
so you and I can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go, if you can end the screen share on your end, then we can go back to seeing all our faces on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me move here we go. Okay. Here we are.
Well done. Okay. So you mean I'm sort of playing the individualistic role and saying, okay, I want to be focused, and you're playing the relational role now, right? And saying, I want to share this information.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I got that you were saying. Very cool. Before we get into I'll just show you. I'm going to ask you to ask a question or offer a seed question for the rest of us to reflect on. Okay. But before we go there, I just wanted to ask you this one personal piece from your story that we discussed. Can you share with us what happened in your life to sort of get you moving in this direction? How did you wind up in this direction in your life and your career that you've been on?
Well, a little more background than what's in my the background is that I really planted myself as a pioneer when I chose to go to UC Santa Cruz, to pioneer UC Santa Cruz in the 60s. And being a pioneer has just been a part of my identity. I haven't seemed to be interested in doing things that other people are doing. So that's a big step in the direction. And then rather than, I had intended to work at Juvenile Hall as a great social worker, but opportunity landed in my lap to open a store on Union Square, bringing the health food industry out of the back streets and the hippie culture of America in 1971. And I just had to do that. It was too interesting. And it was there, and I already have connected with Aryeh that he was in the health food industry too. I think it was a breeding ground for people with a conscience about business for social responsibility. But it was there that my boss was and the owner of the store was Madison Avenue madman, as we would call him now in the United States, a real advertising guy. And the contrast of New York and California was part of the difference, but also, obviously, he was a man, I was a woman. But the way I wanted to run the store was so different than the way he would. And in order to get things my way, I had to do things his way and my way. And ultimately, I figured that was what the success of the store was about. I could give you examples, but I'm not going to take the time. But it was one day when one of the customers, a longtime customer who I'd felt the best way I could serve him was to leave him alone. He always came in with a scowl on his face, so I just left him alone. But he came up to me one day and said, I just have to ask you a question. And I braced myself, and he said, I just can't figure this place out. It's so well run, and there's not a hint of authoritarianism. How does this work? And, I opened my eyes and thank you. And I knew who the authoritarian was and where he was, down in the office in the basement. And he had taught me that a store takes on the character of either the owner or a strong manager. And I knew who the strong manager was. And as this fellow went out the door, I said to myself, I wonder if it has anything to do with my being a woman. And that was the beginning of it. So long story, lots of words, but that's where it started. Wow. And even I was actually afraid when I really started to take this on. It was like an epiphany that this is what I wanted to do. I mentioned to Ofu earlier that I had been involved in the Hunger Project and wanted to end the hunger within us all for full self-expression and satisfaction in the workplace, as well as ending hunger in the world. And it became clear to me that being a fully expressed woman was what was missing. But it was scary because I wasn't going to earn much money doing this. But I followed my heart. And I'm going to add one more thing. I did live in Mexico for a while, and it was in a conversation with my women friends in Mexico where I asked her, what is it? What are the stereotypes? I asked them, what are the stereotypes you have about Americans? They were shocked that I would be so forthright, but they answered, they said, well, we think that you make all your decisions based on money. And so when it was time for me to decide what I wanted to do in my life, I wasn't going to make it based on money. And that's what brought me into this field. Ta-da!
Thank you, Bonita. Yeah, I thank you for that. And Usman, I see that it's time for you to go off to prayer.
Oh, no.
And
Usman, we just have to talk.
Let me unmute Usman a second. Hang on. Okay. How long are you going to be away, Usman?
Maybe in the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
10 or 15 minutes. Okay. We'll look forward to your coming back.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Brother. Okay. Let's see. We'll mute his screen. Okay. So thank you, Bonita. So, okay. So the core of our circle is really the chance for us to share reflections. I had omitted to talk with you about this ahead of time, but do you have a seed question that you might offer for the rest of us to reflect on as a way of getting the conversation going?
Well, I will just say, have you had any experience yourself in really having a great partnership with a woman or with a man in the way in your work? And what is it? How could you name what it was that other person would bring? I know, Wendy, I know you have some other things that you want to talk about in terms of women to women. So that's all part of, or man to man. But what might be possible if we had these relational competencies more available